I awake, I'll end all anger. When I awake, I will know thy love. Hello friends, Nayaswami Hriman here. I continue with Lesson 9 from the Super Advanced Course Number 1 by Paramhansa Yogananda on the subject of anger, conquering anger. I remember one of the things that Swami Kriyananda would say in respect to anger is he would relate it to thwarted desires. Anger, he said, is the result of thwarted desires or expectations, you might say. Someone disappoints your expectations and you get angry. So Kriyananda, Swami Kriyananda would have an affirmation. He would say, nobody owes me anything. And I think in close relationships, work relationships, marriage, etc., family, I think that's an important thing to affirm. No one owes me anything. Whatever my karma may be, whatever their karma may be, is very difficult to know. If somebody betrays us, disappoints us, that sort of thing, the latter of which you can, of course, be sure of, no two people can have the same opinion about everything unless they're extraordinarily stupid or dull. So, it's going to happen. And so learning to deal with anger by most people, even those who by no stretch have an anger issue, is something valuable to all of us. However, in this lesson, Yogananda is clearly addressing people who have anger issues. I think back in his day in America in the 1920s and 30s and 40s, it was far more common for parents and employers and people at large to express anger, even violently. Domestic abuse was far more common. I'm not saying it isn't common now, but increasing awareness of the inappropriateness of striking one's partner, whatever, is much more prevalent today. So plus we have anger management courses and rehab systems for anger, which they didn't have in that day. Spanking of children, even cruel, what we would consider now at least to be cruel punishments of children, locking them up and so on, was, wife beating, all of that. So, his experience of anger, culturally speaking, was far more intense than maybe it is for people like you and me. And so here are some of the things he would say. Anger makes you surly. Now, that's obvious. And contaminates others with the same sullenness. Well, okay, I think that's obvious. Unless you're really self-aware, that's not going to help most people when the flame and the match of anger strikes. But it's a good place to start in terms of introspection. And along those lines also, anger makes you uncomfortable first, and then it transmits your discomforts to others. Again, this takes a fairly high level of self-awareness to, when people really get angry, they feel self-righteous and they feel they have every reason to be angry, right? And so the thought that I'm uncomfortable is the last thought that comes until you gain some self-awareness about how uncomfortable it is. I remember something Swami Kriyananda would also say of himself. He would say, peace is my bottom line, a sort of a contrast with, money being a bottom line, as it were. And so he would hold out for himself and for other people that keeping his peace of mind was more important than winning an argument, more important than being right, more important than winning, and so on. Anger defeats its own purpose. It is not an antidote for anger. Mahatma Gandhi was excellent in his followers, which included Dr. Reverend King, Martin Luther King Jr., in the awareness that anger and consequent violence simply produce more of the same. An eye for an eye or tooth for a tooth, Gandhi would say, makes everyone blind and toothless. So again, those statements are matters of a higher degree of self-awareness than for people with anger as a real issue. So, violent wrath may bring suppression of a weaker wrath, but it will never destroy it. Okay? Think of countries warring back and forth. You can conquer a country, but after a time, that conquered country will rise up and throw off its conquerors. Be calm and indifferent to those who deliberately enjoy making you angry. Well, I don't know how many, I can't think of anybody who enjoys making me angry. I suppose somebody does, but you have to be sort of in that push you, pull me relationship with somebody where that might apply. So the suggestion there is if somebody habitually irritates you, try to develop being calm and even indifferent to such people. Now he goes on and reverses this. He says, show outward anger only to those whom you can momentarily stupefy and thus prevent them from doing mischief. But never initiate anger if it actually makes you angry. Or rather, put another way, never be angry inwardly. So an example of that would be like with a child. A child is in danger of hurting himself or somebody else or running across the street. And so if you grab that kid and shout angrily without necessarily being inwardly angry, but in order to impress upon that person the danger or importance of stopping what they're doing. That's what he's referring to there. Real anger, inward anger, poisons your own peace and that of others. Well, okay. Anger is the manna of misunderstanding. Anger is the method by which fools attempt to conquer other people. Yeah, some people who do have anger problems try to steamroller, that's an old-fashioned term, isn't it? Steamroller over others by using strong emotions, anger, to bludgeon them, you might say. People who are weak-willed or whatever their karma may be, who tend to roll over or be a doormat for others. And again, our culture is, I think of bullying. There are bullies and bullies, bullers and bullies. I just made that up. And, they sort of deserve each other. I mean, I hate to put it that way, but a bully, as opposed to a buller, needs to learn to stand up for himself and even take blows if necessary to... Anyway, okay. So, what is the antidote? Pretty simple. Love is the great antidote for anger. However, he gives a caution. Do not be demonstrative in your love towards an angry person in that moment. He is not in the mood to appreciate your expression of love. His reasoning faculty and good nature are temporarily paralyzed by his anger. That's pretty wise counsel. When somebody's shouting at you, angry at you, It's not easy to silently pour out your love towards that person. There may be, he doesn't say this here, but in the fact that he says do not be demonstrative during that period reminds me of things Swami Kriyananda said in terms of psychic abuse. He wasn't talking about physical, actual, even verbal abuse necessarily, but I think it still holds that be careful about giving love or opening your aura to those who would harm you. It's interesting that Yogananda doesn't say that, but nowadays we're much more keenly aware of psychic abuse and psychic bullying. And all I can say is Swamiji encouraged people to protect themselves. Again, he wasn't talking about physical violence or even verbal violence. He was talking more on a psychic level. And he would even go so far as to say, don't necessarily pray for the person who's trying to harm you, so long as your aura is weak. That's what he's saying. Okay? All right, well, that's when anger attacks you, conquer it. When you are angry, say nothing. My mother said, like mothers everywhere in my generation, count to 10, Johnny, before striking your brother. It's a disease, sort of like a cold, Yogananda says. So throw it off with a mental warm bath. Fill your mind to the exclusion of all else with thoughts of people, now this is interesting, with whom you could never imagine being angry. Isn't that interesting? No matter what they do. So, when violently angry, douse your head with cold water if you need to, or rub the medulla or the temples or the forehead or the point between the eyebrows or the top of the head with a piece of ice. Take a cold shower, you dummy. Okay. Develop metaphysical reason in order to destroy anger. Not sure what he means by metaphysical reason. I don't know how that differs from other kinds of reason, but that's what he wrote. So, and I think following he gives an example of what he means. He says, look upon the anger-rousing agent as a child of God, perhaps like a little 5-year-old baby brother who has unwittingly perhaps stabbed you with a pencil or something. You wouldn't stab back your baby brother who didn't know what he was doing when he injured you, would you? When you become Christ-like and look upon all humanity as little brothers hurting one another, for they know not what they do, then you cannot feel angry with anyone. Ignorance, you see, he writes, is the mother of all anger. So I think that's what he means by metaphysical reason. It's the reason of your soul, the reason of the Christ within you, who forgives all, for they are simply ignorant. Okay, so when anger comes, he says, think of love. Think that as you do not want others to be angry with you, you do not wish others to feel your ugly anger. Okay, when anger comes, set in motion the machinery of your calmness. Let it move the cogwheel of peace, love, and forgiveness. And with these antidotes, destroy anger. He continues with the imagery of machinery, a very common one in his day, in his time of factories in all the cities. Okay, destroy anger with love. Okay, great souls, see you soon.